If you're still being humble in 2025, you've already lost. You think staying quiet, modest, and humble is going to get you respect? No. It's going to get you ignored, broken, walked on. Let me break your illusion right now. The lie you've been fed your whole life by teachers, weak parents, society is that if you're humble, people will recognize your work. That's fiction. You can be the most skilled, talented, hardworking person on the planet, but if you stay quiet, if you stay in the shadows, guess what? You'll watch lesser men win the game because they had the audacity to speak up and demand what you were too humble to ask for. Confidence isn't arrogance, it's survival. And if you don't dominate, you will be dominated. Most people have been brainwashed to believe that humility is some kind of secret virtue that will open doors, gain respect, and attract success. It's not. In fact, humility, especially the way it's pushed today, is one of the most damaging psychological programs you can run in your mind. You're told from childhood to sit down, be quiet, don't brag, don't make others uncomfortable. You're warned that confidence looks like arrogance, that speaking highly of yourself is boastful, and that true strength comes from being the silent type. But here's the truth no one tells you. That version of humility is a weapon used to keep you small, controllable, and out of the way. The world doesn't care how humble you are. It doesn't care how many hours you worked in silence. It doesn't hand you trophies for being modest. People notice what you show them, not what you hide. So when you hide your wins, your progress, your capabilities because you think being low-key makes you good, what you're actually doing is teaching the world to overlook you. The guy who walks into a room and owns his greatness gets attention. The guy who sits there silently, hoping to be noticed for his humble nature, gets forgotten. And it's worse than just being ignored. Being humble in the way most people do it is actually a form of self-sabotage. It's a mindset that says, I don't deserve too much. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable with my success. I'll tone it down. That is psychological surrender. That is weakness disguised as virtue. If you tone yourself down to make others feel secure, then you've already put their comfort above your own progress. You've lost the battle before it even began. People think they're being noble when they don't speak about their strengths. But what they're really doing is conditioning themselves to shrink. Every time you tell yourself not to mention your accomplishments, not to speak with conviction, not to show the world what you're capable of, you reinforce this internal message. I'm not supposed to stand out. And that's deadly. Because the world doesn't reward potential, it rewards presence. If people don't see you as powerful, they don't treat you as powerful. Now understand this. There's a massive difference between humility and being grounded. Being grounded means you know who you are without the need for approval. But that doesn't mean you hide your power. Hiding your value because you're afraid of judgment isn't humility. It's fear. And fear is the root of every lost opportunity. People stay humble because they're afraid of backlash, afraid of being seen, afraid of becoming a target. But guess what? If you ever plan to lead, win, or dominate in any field, you must become a target. If no one's aiming at you, it means you're not even in the game. Being humble might make you likable, but being powerful gets you results. No one remembers the quiet guy who was always polite and humble. They remember the one who walked in with presence, spoke with certainty, and didn't ask for permission to win. That's the difference. And once you understand that, you stop playing the humility game. You stop hiding. You stop shrinking. You start showing up as who you are, unapologetically capable, not to impress others, but to claim the space you've earned. Because if you don't, someone less talented, less skilled, and far louder will take it from you without hesitation. People love to talk about how success comes from being disciplined, consistent, and humble. But what they don't want to admit is that real winners, elite performers, top 1%, they're not walking around trying to be liked. They're not concerned with appearing modest. They're obsessed with domination. They're fixated on winning. That's not arrogance, it's clarity. And clarity looks aggressive to people who've spent their lives playing small. The idea that winners should be humble is one of the most ridiculous myths ever sold. The world's most dominant individuals, athletes, CEOs, entrepreneurs, fighters, visionaries, they're locked in on their mission with such tunnel vision that the concept of humility doesn't even enter the frame. Why? Because humility is distraction when you're trying to conquer. While others are spending time worrying about appearing modest or not stepping on toes, the real winners are asking one question. What does it take to win? That's it. That's the mindset. The outcome is more important than the image. People confuse humility with virtue, but in reality, it often stems from fear. A winner doesn't have time to downplay himself. When you're locked in at the top of your game, you don't stop to make sure everyone around you feels comfortable. You're not diluting your confidence so others can swallow you easier. The people who rise to the top understand that their energy must be undeniable. You walk into a room and your presence has to say, I know exactly who I am. Not because you're trying to show off, but because you're too focused on your path to care about how it lands. Being humble sounds noble. It's the kind of thing society praises because it keeps everyone tame and in line. But winners aren't tame. They're relentless. They're not thinking about fitting in. They're thinking about how to rise, how to perform, how to build leverage, how to push harder than everyone else. And when you're in that zone, you don't have space in your mind for social approval games. You don't tone yourself down. You don't wait to be noticed. You build the momentum and force the world to pay attention. Most people waste time trying not to be too much. But the very thing they call too much is the fuel that winners run on. You have to be obsessive to be great. You have to believe without flinching that you deserve to dominate. That's what drives you through setbacks, boredom, fatigue, failure, the belief that you are meant for more. Humility can't power that engine. It won't keep you moving when everything is falling apart. But obsession will carry you through the fire. Now, look at the most successful people you admire. Do they look humble? Do they sound humble, or do they sound certain? The truth is, they know their worth, they own it, and they lead with it. They're not wasting time on false modesty. They're building empires. The world doesn't give crowns to the quiet. It gives them to the focus, to the bold, to the people who are so driven, so locked in, that humility becomes irrelevant. Not because they're trying to be arrogant, but because their mission is bigger than perception. You can't play to win and play not to offend at the same time. And winners always choose the win. In today's world, success doesn't go to the most talented, it doesn't go to the most disciplined, or even the most intelligent. It goes to the most visible. You can be a genius in the dark, a master of your craft, grinding day and night behind closed doors, but if no one sees you, no one cares. Visibility is currency, attention is power, and the person who commands it controls the game. Humility, as it's sold to you, keeps you hidden, and it convinces you that if you're good enough, the world will eventually notice. But the truth is, the world's too distracted to care unless you make it. People aren't scanning the planet looking for quiet heroes. They're drawn to noise, to presence, to certainty. The loudest voice in the room, the one with conviction, gets listened to, even if it's wrong. The quiet, humble expert gets ignored, even if they're right. This is how the real world works. You think you're doing something noble by staying humble, by not promoting yourself, by waiting patiently for recognition, but all you're doing is letting someone less talented take your spot, simply because they had the nerve to show up loud and proud. This is why visibility beats virtue. You can be 10 times better than the next guy, but if he markets himself, owns his space, talks like a winner, and moves like one, he wins. You sit there thinking, I'm more qualified, but the world doesn't operate on quiet qualifications. It operates on belief, on energy, on presence. And that presence only happens when you drop the fake humility and start standing on your value. We live in an era where people worship personalities more than results. That's a fact. People don't buy products, they buy confidence. They follow people who look like they know where they're going. That's why someone can build a massive following, sell out programs, get brand deals, and become an industry name without being half as good as you, because they weren't humble. They were loud, they were visible, they were unapologetic. And visibility brought them opportunities you'll never even hear about because you stayed quiet in your little corner, waiting to be noticed. This is the cost of humility. It keeps you from building a personal brand. It keeps you from putting your work out there. It keeps you from charging what you're worth. It convinces you to stay small so you don't offend anyone with your confidence. Meanwhile, the people who own their greatness, even if they're half as skilled, walk away with the rewards. They speak on stages. They get the interviews that land the deals. And they do it not because they're better, but because they understand that attention is the gateway to influence, and influence is the game. There are people right now watching you from a distance, wondering if you're confident enough to lead them. They want someone to follow, someone who owns their value, speaks with authority, and isn't afraid to stand tall. But if you're too humble to show up, you'll never be that person. You'll never lead. You'll never have the leverage Because people don't follow shadows, they follow signals. Signals of strength and full of belief. Humility dims that signal, visibility amplifies it. And if you're serious about winning, you need to decide which one you're going to choose. The brutal truth is this: the world doesn't reward silent excellence. It rewards bold expression. It rewards those who understand that staying humble might make you polite, but it'll never make you powerful. Pause this and look at your life. Are you where you want to be? If not, ask yourself, how much longer are you going to keep pretending that being humble is a virtue when it's clearly holding you back? Being humble in the modern world is like walking into a jungle with your head down and your hands behind your back. You think you're being noble, respectful, likable, but what you're really doing is announcing that you're not a threat. And in any environment that values strength, business, competition, relationships, it's not a good thing. Because whether people admit it or not, this world is full of predators. They don't always come with sharp teeth or weapons. Sometimes they show up as co-workers, partners, competitors, even friends. People who are constantly scanning for signs of weakness, looking for who they can manipulate, overlook, or use. And humility, especially when it's constant and performative, signals weakness. It tells the world you're someone who won't push back, someone who won't demand more, someone who can be outshined without a fight. People don't respect what you don't assert. If you don't speak with conviction, if you don't make it clear that you value yourself and your position, someone else will take advantage of that opening. They'll interrupt you, they'll undercut you, they'll talk over you in meetings, they'll assume you'll accept less. And the reason they do it isn't always malicious, it's instinctual. In high-stakes environments, people naturally gravitate toward dominance. When you act humble all the time, when you downplay your abilities, when you constantly defer to others, you essentially lower your status in their eyes. And once they've labeled you as the safe one, the non-threat, the background character, they'll never see you as a leader. People who rise to the top understand this dynamic on a primal level. That's why they carry themselves with power. That's why they speak with certainty, not because they're better than you, but because they understand that in the real world, perception drives treatment. When you show up as humble, constantly stepping back, avoiding the spotlight, letting others take the credit or control, you reinforce your own invisibility. And what starts as humility quickly becomes a habit of self-erasure. You become the person who lets things happen instead of making things happen. And those who make things happen run right past you. This happens everywhere. In the workplace, the humble employee gets buried in work and passed over for promotions because they never made their value visible. In negotiations, the humble player accepts a weaker deal because they don't want to seem difficult. In relationships, the humble partner gets taken for granted because they never demand what they deserve. It's not because the world is evil, it's because the world is responsive. It reflects what you project, and when you project humility constantly, people stop seeing your power. That's why being humble attracts predators, not just the obvious manipulators, but anyone who's wired to compete. The moment you step back, they step forward. The moment you soften your edge, they sharpen theirs. The moment you stop claiming your worth, they start setting your value for you, and it's always lower than what you deserve. The mindset of humility keeps you polite. The mindset of assertion keeps you protected. If you don't guard your position, someone else will claim it like it was never yours to begin with. In environments where power matters, humility doesn't make you safe, it makes you vulnerable. It tells the room, I'm not going to fight. And that message, whether you realize it or not, invites the fighters to circle. It's not about being aggressive or hostile, it's about being undeniable. When you walk in, people need to feel that you know your worth, that you're ready to defend it, and that you won't back down just to seem humble. If they don't sense that from you, they'll test you. And if you fail that test once, they never see you the same way again. The world reflects what you believe about yourself. Not what you say you believe, but what you truly carry in your body, your tone, your presence. Confidence doesn't just influence how you feel. It shapes how people treat you, what opportunities you're given, and how far you're allowed to go. And here's the part most people miss. Confidence creates reality. It shapes the energy around you. It influences decisions, outcomes, and momentum. If you walk into a room acting like you don't belong, people will treat you like you don't. If you act like you're unsure, people will question you. But if you walk in with certainty, even if you don't have all the answers, people will follow you because certainty is magnetic. And humility, when overused, erodes that. Humility teaches you to downplay your strengths. It tells you to speak softly about what you can do. It trains you to show the world a diluted version of yourself. But when you do that, you're not just being polite, you're programming yourself to believe you're not worth much. You're reinforcing a loop that says, I shouldn't shine too brightly, I shouldn't take up too much space. And the problem is, the subconscious doesn't understand nuance. If you repeatedly downplay yourself, your mind starts accepting that as reality. You stop reaching, you stop risking, you stop expecting more, and the world responds to that energy by offering you less. People think confidence is something you earn after success, but it's actually something you use to create success. When you believe in your ability to figure things out, even before the proof shows up, you make bolder moves. You speak up. You take control. You walk away from bad deals. You take opportunities others hesitate on. That forward energy creates traction. It pushes you ahead while others are waiting for permission. Confidence is an accelerant and it starts internally, but humility slows it down. It tells you to be cautious, to be soft, to wait for validation. And while you're waiting, someone else is already making moves with half your skill and twice your conviction. The truth is, people don't follow quiet talent, they follow certainty. They follow whoever stands tallest, whoever believes in themselves the most, whoever makes bold moves with no apologies. That's how influence works. That's how leadership works. People are drawn to strength, to self-belief, to energy. And when you've trained yourself to always be humble, you become neutral. You lose your edge. You forget how to speak with weight. And the world doesn't remember neutral people. It remembers the ones who made you feel something, who made you believe. Confidence makes others believe in you, but more importantly, it makes you believe in you. That belief becomes a foundation. It's what you stand on when the plan isn't clear, when the pressure is high, when no one else believes. It becomes your internal fuel. But you can't build that kind of foundation when you're stuck in a mindset that constantly tells you to pull back. You can't train your brain to dominate if every time you win, you shrug it off and pretend it's no big deal. You can't become a force if you're scared of showing force. Humility might keep you liked, it might keep you safe, but confidence is what keeps you in motion. It pushes you to act before the timing is perfect. It pushes you to speak up when silence is easier. It pushes you to own your wins, to take the shot, to bet on yourself when no one else will. That's the difference. That's the dividing line. Humility keeps you in check. Confidence rewrites the game. Humility is sold to us like a sacred virtue, a moral compass that keeps us grounded and respected. From a young age, we're told to be humble, to never boast, to stay in our lane and not make waves. But what no one openly discusses is how humility, as it's commonly taught, is actually a system of control disguised as virtue. It's a tool used by those in power to keep the masses compliant, small, and manageable. The more you are humble, especially in the way society instructs, you become easier to influence, easier to overlook, and less likely to challenge the status quo. It's a form of social programming that quietly but effectively restricts your potential. Think about it. When you are humble in the traditional sense, you hold back your achievements, minimize your talents, and avoid claiming credit. On the surface, that sounds honorable, but in reality, you're training yourself to accept a smaller slice of the pie. You're accepting the idea that your value is limited and that making yourself visible or loud is somehow selfish or arrogant. This mindset doesn't come from nowhere. It's been cultivated by cultural norms, education systems, and social structures that benefit from having compliant, modest individuals rather than confident, dominant leaders everywhere. The reason humility became a prized trait is because it helps maintain balance of power. If everyone is loudly claiming their worth, if everyone is pushing for more, if everyone refuses to settle for less, systems built on hierarchy and control start to crumble. Those at the top want people who listen, who don't question, who stay in their place. Humility encourages that. It promotes silence, deference, and a willingness to play small. It's easier to manage a room full of humble people than a room full of confident, unapologetic individuals demanding respect and fairness. Moreover, humility often masks insecurity. People who are genuinely powerful don't have to remind you of it. Their energy, their presence, their actions speak for themselves. But those who constantly emphasize humility are often doing it to cover up self-doubt or fear of standing out. This dynamic feeds into the control mechanism because it keeps you looking inward for validation instead of outward for opportunities. It keeps your focus on not offending others or making waves instead of on breaking barriers and creating impact. This manufactured humility also discourages ambition. When you're trained to always be humble, you start to see big dreams and bold goals as selfish or unrealistic. You stop pushing yourself to the limits because deep down, you're worried about being perceived as arrogant. That fear kills innovation, leadership, and progress. It convinces you that staying in the background is noble, when in fact it's a slow retreat from your own potential. The harsh truth is that humility, as it's sold to most people, is a lie designed to control your behavior. It's a mental cage disguised as a badge of honor. Breaking free from it means redefining what strength and leadership look like. It means recognizing that showing your worth, owning your power, and demanding what you deserve are not arrogance. They're necessary for growth and influence. Real strength comes from confidence, clarity, and the courage to be unapologetically yourself, not from shrinking to make others comfortable. When you start seeing humility through this lens, it becomes clear why so many people stay stuck. They've been trained to play small, to hide their talents, and to defer to others. But the world doesn't reward smallness. It rewards those who claim their space, who speak loudly with purpose, and who refuse to settle for less. Understanding this isn't about becoming arrogant. It's about refusing to be controlled by outdated rules that were never meant to serve your success. Time is about reclaiming your power by questioning the values you were taught and choosing confidence over false humility every single time. You've been told your whole life that humility is a virtue, a way to be good, respected, and liked, but the reality is brutal. Being humble in the way society teaches you is one of the fastest ways to limit your potential, get overlooked, and lose out to those who aren't afraid to own their power. Humility, when taken too far, becomes self-sabotage. It keeps you quiet while others dominate. It invites predators because you don't assert your value. It hides your light when the world rewards visibility, not virtue. Worst of all, it's a mindset sold to control you, telling you to stay small so others stay comfortable. If you want to win in this world, you have to flip that script. You must reject the false humility that keeps you in the shadows and embrace confidence, clarity, and unapologetic self-belief. The world won't hand you respect because you're polite. It will hand it to those who demand it. It won't notice your greatness if you don't show it. So stand tall, speak loud, and claim what's rightfully yours. Because at the end of the day, the only way to rise is to stop being humble and start being dominant.